So, a married guy, a single guy, and a guy in a relationship sit down at a table to talk relationships. It's not a joke. It's what's actually happening on Born to Reign today.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Born to Reign. We're glad to have you guys with us. I've got Jeremiah with me.
As always.
As always, except when he's studying for CPA exams, of course.
Yeah.
Has there ever been an episode where Jeremiah's not in it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There have been a few.
Okay.
Yeah.
He left me hanging a few times.
Well, had to do it. Yeah. Tim's good at doing it by himself now, so he can start a radio show,
Yeah, maybe. Probably not, though. But on the other side, on my left hand here, I've got David Dizon from Kickin It Around podcast.
Hey, everybody.
He's our good longtime friend. We both have podcasts, and we've been talking for a little while about, hey, we should do a crossover. So today we've got Born to Reign doing a Kickin It Around podcast with David, and then if you go over to the Kickin It Around podcast, we'll have a second episode with David to extend this conversation that we have here today. But based on consensus,
Yep.
we're talking relationships, and specifically from a guy's perspective.
Yeah, let's just leave that out there from a guy's perspective.
Yes.
Throw it out there. Not that the fair sex can't glean anything from this, but
Yeah.
I would say this is definitely for the young men.
I would actually
or the old men.
encourage them to listen still.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might learn something about the man's perspective that you didn't know before. And I think that's a valuable thing. You gotta know how those men think. They're ravenous monsters.
Yeah.
They're strange creatures. It's funny. I saw a video on Facebook just the other day that the person was like, it was a girl, and she's like, guys, you say girls are confusing? We think guys are confusing. So if you have a room full of guys and girls, you can be sure that nobody has any clue what's going on in the other person's head. Like,
Right.
everybody's confused about everything. So it's beneficial to have conversations about relationships while also steering it in a very Christ-honoring, Christ-glorifying way. That whatever relationship you have, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a marriage relationship, whether it's a dating relationship, that all of it should be pointing and glorifying God in all aspects and all attributes. So I think what we were first talking about, though, is why relationships are a good thing, right? So you, Jeremiah, kind of threw it out there. It was like, do you want to be in a relationship? If the answer is yes, then that's a good thing. That shouldn't be enjoy your single years while you can thing, right? It's like it's a good thing to desire that relationship.
Yeah. Singleness isn't a gift, celibacy is.
Right.
And if you're, I think we have a few books, maybe a couple church cultures, non-denominational, denominational cultures to blame for the whole be content while you're single. In reality, what they're telling you to do is fight God's design. It's like latent transgenderism. You have to fight God's design that He put in you. He put into you, I want to get married, I want to have kids. And they're telling you to ignore that. And that's unhealthy, I believe. Of course, there's a little bit of truth to it where if you're idolizing it or whatever, then you're in trouble. But yeah, it's a good place to start is the whole singleness, enjoy your single years thing. And I always like to throw in there, not enough people, I think, I've only heard it said by one person, talk about natural theology when it comes to marriage and relationships.
Now, can you define natural theology?
That's God revealing Himself in nature, and I think in today's America, people are getting married into their 30s, and that's pretty old to get married. When natural theology tells us that men and women are at their sexual peaks at about 20 years of age.
Yeah.
So God reveals to us through nature that we need to be getting married around that time. And it's kind of hard to not get. I got married when I was 21 maybe, and No, my phone makes a weird buzzing noise. But it was hard. It was weird. And I like to throw that out there for the whole, like, enjoy your singleness, go out and do whatever you want.
Well, I think if we're commanded to be fruitful, multiply, there comes a point where you're supposed to be. Fruit is expected at a certain point, but a tree, a sapling, is not going to bear fruit in its first year, and
Right.
so you don't want to rush to that point, but you also want to get to this point where, okay, the tree is mature. Why is it not bearing fruit? What's going on here? Why is it holding back? Is it afraid? Is it timid? What goes into that? And when we look and evaluate why we're holding back from relationships, I think it is there's a lot that goes into, just be content in your single years. And to say that you're not supposed to be content, that's not what we're saying at all, right? Because we want to say, Paul says, I've learned to live in all things, to be content in all things. Whatever the situation that you're in now, you can be content in the situation, yet still look and have a desire towards an end goal. My life has a purpose. I'm moving towards something else. So it's one thing to say, being content in your singleness is not to say, I don't want to get married anymore, therefore now I'm ready to get married. It's this is the season that I'm in, and when that time comes, I'm ready to go. Is the content. Because if you're not ready to be content in all things, in all places, at all times, you're not going to be content in a marriage. You're not going to be content in a dating relationship. You're not going to be content in a courtship. So you have to be ready to.
I think that's absolutely right. I think where maybe we've gone wrong as a people is we teach that being content means you flatten all circumstantial differences. Paul says, I'm content in all circumstances. He said at one point, I was full of sorrow yet joyful. I think what we're taught today is that when you're content, that means you don't recognize the difference between circumstances. So being content in your singleness means you think singleness is good.
Right.
You can think singleness is bad and be content in it.
You can also idolize singleness by just not wanting to be in a relationship, and like having that mindset of I'm single and I'm happy. Like that's really self-centered thinking that way. Is that I'm happy this way single, but if you struggle with, like, say, lust, that's not a good thing.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Well, and how many guys, Pastor Doug Wilson always says, you get the guy that goes, I've got the gift of celibacy or the gift of singleness. And he goes, well, do you struggle with lust? And he goes, yeah. Then you don't have that. Scratch that off your list.
Check.
Or just the simplest terms. Do you want to be married? Do you want to be in a relationship? If the answer is yes, then I would say you can scratch the gift of singleness off of your list.
Or if you struggle with lust and porn and all this stuff, yet you don't want to be married, you still have the duty to get married.
Yeah.
Essentially, that's
because
the Bible teaches.
This is where you have 1 Thessalonians 4 that comes into it, where it says, "For this is the will of God." 1 Thessalonians 4:3 says, "For this is the will of God, even your sanctification, that you should abstain from fornication, that every one of you should know how to possess his vessel in sanctification and honor." And it's an interesting, when you look into the study where it talks about verse 4, each one of you should know how to possess his own vessel. A lot of people take that to mean that a man or an individual needs to learn how to have self-control, right? But when the word that's actually used there for possess his own vessel is to acquire a vessel. And so when it's talking about this is the will of God for you, that you would abstain from fornication, that you should learn how to acquire a vessel in sanctification and honor, not in the lust, verse 5, not in the lust of concupiscence, even as the Gentiles, which know not God. So now you have this, okay, this is the will of God, that you abstain from this immorality. Now go find yourself a wife.
Yeah.
So that you don't fall into this sin, so that you don't fall into the lust like the Gentiles do. So it's built in there. Where if you read that wrong and talk about how to possess your own vessel as being your own body, you read this complete. It changes the whole meaning of the text. Yeah. It basically tells you that you're not supposed to get married, that you're supposed to suffer from those things by yourself. When we look at the creation account and know that the only thing that God said in all of creation that was not good was for the man to be alone. And so when we look at that creation order, like you were saying, that creation order then becomes necessary to say, look, this is good. Don't fall into this sin. Learn how to acquire that vessel. Learn how to acquire that wife. Go find yourself a wife. Is really what Paul's saying here.
Right.
And if you read it wrong, if you read that passage wrongly, you end up coming to the wrong conclusion.
It's kind of hard to read it wrong, though, don't you think? It kind of seems obvious.
Yeah.
It's probably some alternate intentions in reading it that way.
Yeah. Well, and the thought that you have to drive every single lustful thought out of your head before you're qualified for marriage.
Right.
Yeah.
Is
No, in our confession, me and Tim's, the Westminster Confession says that marriage has three purposes: to quench lust, to be a help to each other for companionship, and to produce holy seed, to produce children.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in there. Like one of the purposes of marriage is to help quell your lust, but there is a certain aspect where I say that a lot of people tend to think, okay, so I get married and it literally solves all my problems. In a lot of ways, it puts your problems under a magnifying glass. It puts your problems on 10x, on HD. And
4K.
Yeah. And then you're like, oh, snap, I didn't even realize. So there's some ways in which if you, let's say, for example, I'm just going to get pretty deep here, all right? If you're into pornography and the whole, and you get sexually aroused by the strange, just like the whole, how Proverbs says water eaten in secret is sweet and stolen bread is good to eat. If the only thing that really turns you on is like the fornication is what turns you on, then when you get into marriage, you're going to struggle. You're going to be like, wait, I'm in a good sanctified relationship, but I'm struggling sexually because I was so used to the sweetened water because it was stolen that now normal water doesn't taste like anything to me. So
faithfulness no longer tastes right.
Right. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit of, especially, and that needs to be said in our culture, that a lot of us have seared consciences.
That's what First Thessalonians continues on talking about later on, is those who have a seared conscience before God.
Right. It would
in those things.
It'd be awesome not to have to address that stuff, but that's kind of, a lot of men are like, okay, I'm addicted to porn, I just have to make it to marriage. Well, you actually gotta pray the Holy Spirit will transform your mind, because while marriage will help, you need to be able to, like,
it's not a magic bullet.
Yeah, it's not. It takes the power of the Holy Spirit, and a wife does help a lot. But I was graced enough to not have to deal with the addictions that I think 95% of men have to deal with today.
Yeah,
the Holy Spirit kept me from that, and I think it's a lot of the reasons because I got married young. But I've talked with plenty of people who have lots of problems. So I don't remember why I brought that up, but
well, if we just shift, okay, so that helps. We realize it's not a magic bullet. It doesn't fix all of the problems,
right?
But it definitely, it's a push in the right direction.
Yeah.
What do we say to the single guys who are afraid to, maybe afraid of rejection? You don't want to step out. This is kind of conversations that
I feel
David
attacked right now.
Yeah, what do you say to that, David?
and maybe David, you would have a better way to ask the question. But when you deal with that, what does it take to make that first step? You know, I'm kind of a few steps down that road.
Well, I'd say first of all, get over yourself, and then as a Christian, you need to remember that as a man, you need to be a leader. You don't wait. Like if you like someone, ask them out. Like don't wait for them to ask you out. That's not how that relationship's supposed to work.
And don't leave the little paper in front of them with the do you like me? Circle me? Yes or no. That's not taking
and
initiative
then they write
either. Yeah. They write what?
You.
Not just no, but you know.
I would say be upfront with your intentions to the single dudes. Like when I met my wife, when I told her I liked her, finally after like 9 months, because I was a little bit scared, I told her I like you, and where I come from, that means I could see myself marrying you. Like that doesn't. I'm not
where I come from.
Did you say that? Did you tell her that?
Yeah, I told her that.
Okay, all right.
And I was 17, she was 15, I think. And she was like, cool. And I was like, oh, okay. Because my dad has always told me, like, just be upfront. And so I was, probably a little bit too much so. And it didn't scare her away. So maybe don't be as upfront as me, because people know me as like a overly upfront person.
What?
But
no.
But like, don't hide your intentions. Don't let her think that she's getting into a casual dating relationship.
Right. Be intentional.
Yeah. Like, make sure she knows that you have marriage on the brain, but don't freak her out with it. You know, like, you don't need to be getting married as soon as you start dating, but she needs to know that you're not dating to
pass the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Waste time.
Or waste the money. Like, at any time you don't want to marry me, just tell me, because these dates are adding up.
I'll send you the bill. We can even split it 50-50.
Equality.
Yeah, we're not egalitarian. No. Yeah, because when you get down to the confusing aspects of a relationship, everybody's trying to figure out, and everybody reads into the other person's, what the person says. Guys tend to criticize girls for overthinking things, but we overthink things just as much, just in different ways. And so I think when you boil down the way a guy thinks he's overthinking, is actually, in a lot of ways, I think, ends up being an abdication of responsibility and authority, rather than, okay, think, evaluate, act. You think, evaluate, think, and you get yourself into this cycle. And then whether you're in a relationship, whether you're married, whether you're looking to take that first step with a young lady, you end up going, you step, reevaluate, step, reevaluate, wait, and then nothing ever ends up happening, and you end up abdicating that idea, or the initiative then to the young lady, which then puts her at risk. And when we look at the Garden of Eden, what happened in the Garden of Eden was that when the authority was abdicated, it put the woman at risk, and the serpent came in and undercut her.
Right.
And not to say that that's anything deceptive about waiting and evaluating, even developing a friendship prior to getting into a relationship, but
should do that.
There's a cautious point where, even though you're evaluating things, who's taking the brunt of the difficulty towards the relationship? You shouldn't be having to put yourself out there and go, do you like me? Yes or no. When you put that out there, you're kind of, you put the awkward difficulty on the other person,
right? Mm-hmm. Instead of taking responsibility.
Yeah, saying, look, being vulnerable. Look, I like you. do you like me back? And here's where I'm going. Do you want to come with me? You know, in life, and that's where you set yourself up for success as a man. But if we back it up there, when you're talking about some of the struggles, even not in the lust category, if a man's not taking responsibility in other areas of his life, it's going to be really, really hard to take responsibility for a successful relationship. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would.
So when we get into how can a young man, let's say, no prospects at this point, you're not in a relationship at all, maybe a 15, 16-year-old who might be listening to this, even 25, 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old, whoever's listening to this, okay, there's nobody on the horizon. What am I doing now to prepare myself for a relationship? What are those? Obviously, you got married really young, but what do you look back on your life and say, this was helpful for me to prepare myself for that?
There's a couple things I did good. There's one regret I can think of. A couple things I did good was I just focused on my schoolwork, and I understood that at 15, 16 that I could be married in 2 years. I got married at 21, but I understood that I was working towards something that was imminent, really, when it came down to it. I had a good understanding of time. So get it in your mind that just because you're 15 and you're young, that if you want to get married, you can start working at that now through your grades, through your schoolwork. Go get a job. Stop talking back to your mom. Like, start treating your mom with respect. There's certain things that you can start doing now to kind of work towards it, but also don't emanate the eschaton. Don't make it don't try to make something what it's not. If there's some girl that you like or whatever, and you're 15, just leave it alone. I mean, just leave it, because that's where mistakes are made, or when you try to create your ideal out of your current situation, and I can tell you very rarely is that ever gonna happen. Like when you're in high school, so it has happened. It happened to me. We found each other in high school. Like, I was at the very end. She was like halfway through, but so I'm not like technically against high school relationships. I think they can work, but I would say
you married your high school sweetheart.
Yeah, I did.
To eliminate any confusion.
Yeah, I did. But we were different. We were very focused on schoolwork. We were both ahead in our college credits. We were both. I was working full time. Like, we were working towards the maturity that we knew we needed to get to. We weren't trying to create something out of nothing. We're not God. So, to the young man, I would say work hard and just kind of don't try to create something out of nothing, because that's when you're going to make a mistake, when you try to take this girl who's mildly godly but super attractive, and you're going to try to create this relationship that isn't there, and you're going to make mistakes.
One of the best audio resources that I can point anybody to in terms of in this category is it's a sermon by Eric Ludy called "Made Excellent for Marriage," and I think he goes through, I think it's 12 or 13 things that he recommends to his son, like when he started his kid at 6 years old, and was said, here's these 12 principles for how you as a 6-year-old can prepare yourself for being what he called a heroic little lover. He's like, this at 6 years old is how I'm training my kid to grow up to be a good, godly husband. And it was a really well-rounded sermon. But so if you go to, I think it's ellerslie.com, ELLER, Ellerslie, ELLERLY.
Dude, that sounds. I'm not even gonna try.
Yeah.
Ellerslie. Ellerslie.
It's named after the estate of William Wallace. So.
Oh. I think people will get it.
Or if you search Eric Ludy,
You know what else? If you guys are looking for more resources, the Love Song series by Tommy Nelson. Have you ever heard it?
Mm-mm.
Oh, dude, you should listen to it. He goes through, and I listened to this a long time ago. So if you listen to it, he says something weird. Don't blame me, okay? But he goes through the Song of Solomon and exposits it, and it's one of the only expositions of the Song of Solomon that you'll ever see. It's super good. It's super interesting. I think my mom and dad had me listen to that. Like every single time we'd go on a road trip, they'd put on the entire thing. So I listened to that quite a few times growing up, and
Good.
it was excellent. And it's intriguing. Like you're gonna listen to it, you're gonna turn it on, and 3 sermons later you're gonna be like, I can't stop. Like
That's me with Alistair Begg.
Alistair Begg.
oh really? Yeah, you're just like I just need another rock and roll illustration.
You listen to Alistair Begg
A lot.
So, David, anything that you in this, as we're kind of discussing, what are some of those things that you're seeing here? You want to lob out any thoughts?
So,
Or
as
kick
you're
around
right.
some thoughts?
Kick around some thoughts. Like what Jeremiah was alluding to, like when you're in a relationship, it's a lot easier if you're friends first, because you know each other, and even if you get into fights, it's not going to catch you by surprise. Like you know how to handle it because you know each other, and that just makes it a lot easier. But I guess as a single dude, I would encourage, I guess, whoever's listening to this episode, just seek God. Like I know right now in this year, like God's shown me a lot, and it's been good, and it's been like a valley, but knowing that He's there, like how in Psalms He says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I know you're with me." Basically, is what it says. It's been that kind of year for me, like walking through that valley and knowing God's there, and He'll reveal things to you. If you ask Him for wisdom, He'll give you wisdom. If you ask Him to reveal things to you, He will reveal those things to you if you seek Him. Mm-hmm. And so it's been good. It's been a good year. What else? So yeah, as a single dude, like take this time to get to know God more and to develop into the godly man you need to be for not just for your sake, but for your future wife's sake as well. So
To be made excellent for marriage.
Yes.
And obviously, Jeremiah, you were talking, you posted something on Facebook about parenting being like water on an electrical fire. Like it jumpstarts the sanctification process. Marriage does the same thing.
Yeah. Marriage is like
different ways.
Marriage is like getting the electrical fire started, and then when you have a kid, it's like pouring water on it.
Yeah.
And the electrical fire is sanctification.
So, David, what would, as you say, in this year being kind of a tougher year, what do you think if you're just looking, if you step back and look at the church as a whole?
oh man, okay.
What could be better? How could we better help single men in that preparation? What do you think are practical helps that could be done in prepping for those relationships?
So as a leader, I am a leader in our young adults group now. Just holding them accountable is a major thing. And just having like small groups or like get-togethers and like asking them how they're doing. How can we help you in your singleness right now? And just praying for them. Prayer is a powerful weapon for sure. And just knowing where they're at and helping them seek God better.
I would say, make men manly again.
Yes.
If I think we have this tendency for all the men to gather together and try to help each other as victims, like obviously there's a place for it. Don't hear what I'm not saying, but there needs to be a certain aspect of like, buck up, buddy. Like, and I think.
So are you advocating for putting No Shave November on the church calendar?
Yes, that's exactly. The perfect introduction to Advent. Get your Advent beard ready. Yeah, no, I can't even grow one. But no, I'm saying like when you restore that masculinity back to men, you know what's going to happen is they're going to gain gravitas and they're not going to be sad in their singleness anymore because, look, guys, women start to gravitate around you once you gain that back. Women like that. It's like a mosquito to a light. And I think then singleness wouldn't be such an issue. And I think that men would be more straightforward with women. I think men would be less annoying.
Well, I think, and to clarify, and I think you would agree with this, that gravitas and saying that women will come around you is not what the world says. You know, when you put on Old Spice and you have 40 bikini clad girls come,
some Axe body spray.
Yes, this is why I need you.
It's gravitas is different.
Right.
It's being a different kind of man. It's being the man who, not just women, but men, old, young, older women, younger women, look to that person and go, I respect that person. He knows what he's doing. If he's leading other people want to follow that kind of man, because not just because he's good looking and charismatic and has all the nicest clothes. It's because he understands his role in the world as a man, has a vision for where he's going, and walks there confidently. And people gravitate, to use that same term. Mm-hmm. People gravitate towards somebody who knows what they're doing.
Right.
I think I look back at like some of my college days where you're in the class and I'm the one who's paying attention in class, taking notes in class. Who are the people going to come to after class when they're confused on something? They're either going to go to the teacher or they're going to go to the student who understood what the teacher was talking about. Mm-hmm. They're not going to go to the guy who was sleeping through class all the time.
Right.
There's your gravitas. Your gravitas looks different because you look and act different. You apply yourself differently. And so then I think to then take that all the way through is that your gravitas then attracts the right kind of people, because the mission that you're on will attract people that will help you.
Exactly. I think that's the number one mistake that single men make, is what you just said was the mission you're on. A lot of men think, I need to find a woman and make her my mission. Mm-hmm. Women don't like that. Right. A woman wants a man with a mission so that she can help him accomplish it. Adam had a mission, take dominion, and he gave Eve to Adam to help him accomplish that. If Adam would have turned to Eve and been like, wow, well, okay.
he kind of did.
Yeah, he did. Whoa, man. Okay, so, but it's kind of like in 1 Corinthians 11 when he says, God did not make man for the woman, but made woman for the man. It's like the classic old, at the end of a movie when the man's staring off into the sunset, he just accomplished something, and the woman's on his arm, looking up at him, just gazing at him. That's kind of the way the Bible presents men and women. Mm-hmm. The man staring off into the distance towards his future, towards his goals, towards his mission, and the woman is oriented towards the man as his helper. And I think when men lose that, they turn towards the woman and try to make her his mission, and it's such a turnoff for women. And I think a lot of single men are in some way, she will become your mission at some point, because your goal will be to get married. So you're going to kind of focus but...
Well, Paul also says in 1 Corinthians that to get married is to think about worldly things, because you have
your attentions become divided.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, I think one of those things I think of how many meme pages right now tease the Christian meme pages. It cracks me up when I look at it, but they tease the young boys for the best way that they have in youth group and even young adulthood to impress the girls is to carry as many chairs as possible, or a whole couch. Right? Everybody knows it. It's just that unspoken thing in in the church. Like the boys carry as many
You still
chairs
do that in
as they
young adults, David?
No comment.
can. He's like, you're really calling me out? But I think that's one of those, like, this is such a clear differentiation of masculinity versus femininity, that the guy looks at that and goes, ooh, look, I can do this. I need to be strong. It's my responsibility to be strong. And I'm not going to knock that at all. And I think it's one of those things that the problem is we've downgraded what it means to be a man and to look manly amongst other people down to who can carry the most chairs.
Right.
It's a step in the right direction, and it's something that should actually be cultivated. You should not look at church, after youth group. If you go into the youth group and look around, it should not be mostly girls putting the chairs away.
Yeah.
That's something where you've got an inverted order. But teaching the boys to not be squirrely. Yes, pick up the chairs, carry as many as you can. You're not doing it. You're not yelling and draw as much attention to yourself as you can, so that the cute girl across the room notices that you're carrying 8 chairs instead of Billy over here who's just carrying 4.
Billy, what a nerd.
But what can a boy learn how to carry the chairs, carry more chairs than anybody else, but then also help in the nursery when the little babies are crying? Can he articulate in small group what a verse is talking about? Can when the pastor is speaking, does he take detailed notes? Is he thinking through these things? Can he answer questions? Can he say, when people are disagreeing, even after young adults group or after youth group, going, where do we want to go to eat? Can that guy not just take the initiative to stack the chairs, but then to also turn around, sweat pouring down his face, go, all right, we're going to Old Chicago tonight, and keep that that direction going. That he's the leader, whether he's tired or not, whether he's lifting more chairs than anybody else or not. Like, if we're gonna cultivate men to be manly, you shouldn't tease them over their actual manliness.
Right.
You bring to light the deficiencies in a friendly, loving way, but also call them to account when they're slacking off. But also to encourage them, give them that respect. Because we know that men thrive on respect.
Right.
If a man is doing something well, notice it, point it out, encourage them in it, and if somebody takes the leadership. One of the things that men tend to run into is that butting heads, right?
Right.
This guy wants to go to Old Chicago. This guy wants to go to Red Robin, right? Now we have to butt heads. Now we have to figure out who's the more manly to persuade everybody else. There comes a point where it's like, okay, who suggested the first thing first?
Right.
Okay,
Who cares?
It's okay to follow. And
Right.
we don't want to get to such a point where we're macho men, that
Yeah.
it's our way or the highway, and anybody who doesn't agree with us is stupid.
So to young men, I would say, like, if you are, Ben Merkel, I think it was taken off of YouTube, which is just a shame. But Ben Merkel preached a sermon, or maybe it was a lecture about young men, and it was really good. And he said he's talking to a bunch of pastors. He's like, there's always that young man in your church who just kind of irks you. Like, he'll have like quippy things to say that you just kind of pause. You're like, crap, what do I say to that? Like, every pastor has to deal with those kinds of young men. And he's like, but let's say you get all the young men in the church and you're going to go onto a college campus and you're going to argue with atheists. All of a sudden, you're really glad that he's on your side. And Ben Merkel essentially said, those are the young men we need to pick out and raise up to be pastors, to be leaders, because those are the men the church needs. And so to the young men, if you are the person like me who was known for just pretty much arguing all the time, or just speaking up, sometimes inappropriately, then learn how to use that in an appropriate manner. Or if you're on the other end of the spectrum where you don't ever want to disagree with anybody, you don't ever want to challenge anybody, you don't ever want to think for yourself, you need to sharpen your sword a little bit. I think because when a woman, I don't know if she's going to be thinking this, but maybe subconsciously, maybe spiritually, it's kind of built into her. If David's willing to, in small group, say, I don't think that verse, in a respectful manner, be like, I see what you're saying, I disagree because of this. If David's willing to stand up for Scripture, then he's willing to stand up for her. She doesn't want a man who's not willing to challenge or be challenged, because then when push comes to shove, when you're married, she knows you're just going to crumble. Mm-hmm. And then same thing, but if you're a bulldog and you can't let somebody make a decision to go to Old Chicago instead of Red Robin, then what you're doing is you're Barney Fifing, and that's really the opposite of masculinity. Like a masculine man is like the calm man who's just kind of like
steady, consistent.
What's that guy? 300, like the leader of 300. Leonidas. Yeah, King Leonidas. That guy was dope, but he like didn't raise his voice almost the entire time. Unless he was like kicking somebody into a cliff or something, but but that, I think young men need to watch out for both of those ends of the spectrum, and I would actually say that both of those ends of the spectrum are actually peak femininity, and in the middle is where Jesus is. That's being a real man.
It's a challenging world we live in.
Yes,
where being a man is not popular.
Yeah,
oh
my gosh. Holly just sent me this cutest picture of August.
Speaking of raising godly men.
Yeah. Here, you want to look at it real quick?
Let's see it. Oh, man.
Isn't that so cute?
Such an adorable little kiddo.
Okay, but I kind of want to talk about in the relationship.
In the relationship. You're the expert.
You're the married one.
You're the only one who has done it completely successfully. So
I think, okay, here's my advice, and this might be controversial, but here's my advice for when you get into a relationship. Somebody actually asked me, she's like, okay, so what's your marriage advice? I mean, yeah, give me all your advice right now. 'Cause she's one of Holly's best friends. And she was like, guys, download me. And the first thing I said was argue.
$75 an hour. I'm a relationship consultant. If you want my advice, I'll send you the bill.
Yeah, go to makeloverealllc.com and maybe we can set up an appointment. No, the first thing I said was argue. When you're in the relationship, don't ignore red flags. As a matter of fact, you might want to attack those a little bit more aggressively before you're married rather than after you're married. If she or he does something that bothers you, say it. If there's a topic that you think might cause a collision in the future, address it. I think the best thing that I did was I wasn't like bulldogging it, but almost every single time I felt like we would have a problem or thought we had a problem. I didn't feel it. I would.
I don't have any feelings. What are you talking about? Man.
But I would address it, and I'd be like, okay, so like what are we thinking here? And the whole time I was kind of, it was marriage was on the table. It is kind of like if we don't agree, like what are our deal breakers and how is this going to work in the future? Like that's what our relationship was about. And if we disagreed on something, I was like, okay, so how's this going to work out in marriage? And can we still get married and disagree on this? But it was really nice because we learned how to fight with each other successfully before we got married. And that was really nice because now we can argue very successfully. Like marriage isn't about avoiding arguments; it's about how to fight successfully. Like you need to be able to be good at it, and that was the best thing that I could have done. So that's my advice. If you're in a dating relationship, if you're not, when you get into one, make sure you argue as much as you can about the important topics. Not argue, even just discussions. Rarely do we argue; it's mostly just discussions. Or did we argue? I mean.
And then, did you find out that it's possible to argue about things you agree on?
Yep, especially as a man, because she just will go over your head sometimes. Like she'll say something and you just have it in your mind that that's exactly not what she said. Like assumptions. You know what they say about assumptions, right?
Yep.
I think it's one of the huge problems with pastors nowadays is presumption. A presumptuous pastor is not going to be a good pastor if he's just operating off covert contracts that he's presumptuously made with his congregants, or operating off of assumptions he's made about people in his congregation that kills a ministry. It's like cancer. But men do that with their families and with their ladies. She'll say or do something and you just make an assumption or a presumption. Don't do it. Just straight up ask her. Like, that's what I think.
Do not worry. The first advice is free. If you want any more relationship advice,
What was it? Make Love Real, LLC.
Yep.
you got that domain registered.
And if you go to that website and it's something weird, that was a joke. It's not really that website. So courting, dating.
Courting,
What do you guys think about that? Because I wish, me and Holly we kind of did more of I don't know, I guess you could say it was more casual, but obviously it was all about marriage.
Adorting?
Yeah, I don't
Dating?
know. But I wish we would have done more courtish. Like, I wish that we were only alone when I picked her up in the car and took her to a restaurant or whatever and came back to her house. I wish that we didn't kiss before marriage. I'll say that. All right, that's what I think.
Whoa.
He said the kiss word.
Expose.
Like by all other accounts, people are looking at us and like, how did you do that? Like, that was amazing. But I'm like, I don't think we went far enough. When you look at boundaries, don't think how far can I go to the line and not cross it. Think how pure can I stay before marriage.
Like one pastor used an example of that there's a cliff, and people kept running off of this cliff, and dying, getting injured, all of that, falling off this cliff. Mm-hmm. And so they have a town hall meeting and they go, how are we going to fix this issue? People keep falling off the cliff. What are we going to do? And they decided, well, we're just going to put an ambulance down at the bottom of the cliff, so that the people, as they fall off, will have an ambulance right there, and they can whisk them off to the hospital in the ambulance. And somebody raises their hand and goes, well, why don't we just put a guardrail at the top of the cliff? And everybody looks at him and goes, that's crazy. Nobody gets to the bottom of the cliff and says, I need a guardrail. They all get down to the bottom of the cliff and say, I need an ambulance. Uh-huh. So they elected to not put the guardrail up at the top, and instead they put an ambulance at the bottom after everything's already fallen apart. Where it's like the guy who's actually thinking ahead, okay, we can prevent people from falling off of the cliff. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean put the guardrail. A lot of people think, okay, let's put the guardrail right at the edge of the cliff.
Right.
What happens when a little kid at the zoo decides to climb over the guardrail and get into the gorilla enclosure?
The gorilla gets shot. And then you have 2020 as a result.
Yeah. Nothing's been right since Harambe died. But to take that back is, when you put those safeguards in without putting yourself into a massively over legalistic thing that you guys aren't allowed to look. Nope, look away. No eye contact.
Don't look at me.
You can't have eye contact for more than 15 seconds. Yeah. No. What are those things? Did you know that back like in the 1800s they had this thing called a courtship board?
Mm-mm. What is
that?
So when the settlers would have they would have their farms, as a largely farm communities, that the young man would go to court the young lady at the young lady's home. But because the houses were like miles and miles apart, sometimes there would be like snow or it would get dark or rainy or whatever, and the young man wouldn't be able to go home. They would let the couple sleep together, but they would put this board right down the middle of the bed.
That's hilarious.
So that they couldn't touch each other. So they were like, okay, you can spend the night, but the board is here to keep you guys separated.
That is so funny.
That's pretty great.
Some of those random things. Or we actually have one of these.
That's actually helpful because then you know if she snores.
Yeah.
Which is a huge deal breaker.
Yeah.
Right, guys?
Everybody knows it. Sleep apnea? Should we get you to a sleep apnea doctor? But there's also we have one in our china closet at home. There's this thing called a courtship candle. Ever seen one of those?
No.
So it's like
I think
it's like a normal candle stand, but it's spiraled. And when the young man would come over to the house, basically they would light this candle, and when the candle burned down to the base or to the level of the candle, to the level of the candle holder, was when the date was over.
Time to go.
Time to go home, buddy. And so, but basically,
you gotta go home, but you can't stay here.
Yeah.
Depending on how much the father liked the young man, would be how high he would let the candle stick out of the candle
really?
holder.
That's hilarious.
So if he didn't really like the guy, he'd rotate the candle down so that it was just barely sticking out above the.
He lights it. 5 seconds later, he's like, I don't know what to tell you.
So you have some of those like really old devices that people would implement that you go, oh yeah, those were guardrails. Interesting. But it's interesting because those things were even left to the father's discretion, the father of the young lady's discretion, to determine how the relationship was gonna proceed.
So that's a good thing to talk about. Is in a relationship, how does one lead his girlfriend, lady friend, special friend? Prospect. I don't know what you want to call it. But how does a young man lead her without trying to inadvertently subvert her father's authority? You need to start taking. What? Did you guys talk about this?
He just points it at me.
You guys, I mean, obviously you need to take the initiatory role. You need to kind of start establishing, and it's in some ways it's unavoidable because of the ontological differences between male and female. But that's a pretty hefty task, right?
Yeah.
What do you think, Tim?
Yeah. Well, I think specifically is
Challenge him to a duel, and then sorry.
We've already. Well, you don't want to do that if they have younger siblings. All right. You had a father who was not as strong as me. Now I'm the father. I'm not confident enough in my marksmanship to challenge anybody to a duel right now. So, but to step out, I think it goes back to what we were talking about, knowing where you want to go as a man. If you're casting the vision, walk along. You're pursuing Christ above all things. And then you want to bring her along in this, and you want her father to be looking over her shoulder the whole time. Mm-hmm. That you lead, and he can say, is he leading in a safe direction? And then you want to be, as a young man, not recognizing that, I'll even just say I'm not an expert on the world. I'm not an expert on how relationships work. I'm not an expert on life. I'm not an expert even in my job. So I always want to be humble enough that when somebody offers correction, okay, you're going this direction, maybe if we made this slight course correction, would be better. To glean that wisdom from the older person, but to also be confident to say, okay, here's the course correction, I'm still walking the path. Let me take the path. And as those course corrections come, you can obviously use the wisdom. We talked about this several months ago in our Does Wisdom Discriminate episode. Does a young man have the wisdom to say, no, I don't agree with that advice? Now then, if a father says, okay, I think we should be going this direction, if the young man ends up disagreeing with it, he says, I'm going this direction, prayerfully, humbly, full of faith. I'm going this direction, and I disagree with that counsel. Now the father is put in a position to say, okay, is that what I would say is a godly direction? Is there room in that, or does that become a deal breaker? Mm-hmm. There's some things that would just be obvious as like, no, you're a moron, get out of here. Hit the highway, delete her number from your phone. Right. Others, there's going to be something that, okay, yeah, we can agree to disagree on that, there. But it still has to then rest with the father to end up being he gets the veto vote. It's not a suitor versus father, one vote versus one vote. His vote counts for two. And so when those heads butt, for the protection of the young lady, he gets to say, no, we're gonna either table that, we'll bring it up later, either no, or anywhere in between,
Right.
To be able to say that.
Daughters are given. Your daughter must be given.
Yeah.
However, and that's ideal. And if I ever have a daughter, that's how I'm running things. But in a culture, and Timothy kind of, in the book of Timothy, Paul kind of alludes to this, that in the last days, people will be forbidding marriage. And I think that, although I believe that was fulfilled in 70 AD, that thematic wickedness that plays its way through history as we slowly conquer the world shows itself. So, for example, today, marriage is now a minority in America for the first time ever. Mm-hmm. So, the church's culture, you might run into a girl's father who just doesn't esteem marriage highly, who doesn't think his daughter should be married below the age of 27 or 30. And
she needs to focus on her career first.
Yeah, of course, she needs to get her PhD and whatever. Like, you need to, in today's culture, it's kind of like how we understand the government. You submit to the government in the Lord. If it's not in the Lord, you need to be willing to resist peacefully and humbly and faithfully. In today's culture, that's for biblical marriage. That's kind of becoming common, where it's like, I don't think you guys should get married. I think you guys should date for 10 more years. Well, don't you care about our fidelity? We want to get married and honor God, and my parents always did a great job with that. My dad is like, get married and live with us. I don't care, and because my dad said, your purity means more to me than all the money in the world you could make if you weren't. So, I think that's the ideal situation, and there's some subcultures in America, such as like north in the chimney of Idaho. There's a little subculture up there where you have some ideal situations, but a lot of the times in the rest of the nation, if you're going to hold to biblical fidelity, you might have a fight in your hands. Kind of how in Ride Sally Ride. I haven't read it, but my mom read it. She loves it.
Is Ride Sally Ride the one with the sex robots?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that the one?
Is that the one?
But his parents are against him doing something biblical. And I think in times in cultures like this, people start to forbid to marry. This, you kind of end up having to go against your parents in a lot of ways, and in moments like this in history. And so I'm just throwing that out there because almost spilled water in your laptop. I'm sorry, here. Just keep it away from me. Oh, you're more worried about you're so godly. He's more worried about his Bible, guys. But yeah, I'm just throwing that out there because there are some circumstances where you might need to get married anyways, and do it the best way that you can.
And yeah, take what you're given. There are some situations, first generation believer, you're a young man pursuing a young lady who loves the Lord, you love the Lord, you're pursuing her, and then find out that her parents are complete pagans.
Right.
That father's not going to have near as much care or enthusiasm, great word, for maintaining a good biblical relationship with good boundaries, with healthy premarital discussions and counsel, and so you have to kind of roll with that. Who then can you bring in as that outside looking in, wise older married couple? Maybe it's the young man's parents. Okay, maybe what if the young man is a first generation believer? Now maybe got two young believers with pagan parents who are trying to figure this out.
Pastor,
if you're in a good healthy biblical church, your pastor and his wife, and hopefully there are plenty of other mature married couples in the church that you can bring alongside you as faux parents. You're our adopted parents. You're our spiritual parents to be able to walk in along those. But all that then goes to still, how do we as young men display that strength and set those boundaries for ourselves, but also set them for the relationship, but also be willing to accept correction and make those course corrections where necessary.
So David, I have a question for you. Since you're the not relationship guy,
Yet.
Do you
Yes.
ask
Yet.
yet? Oh, so this is actually more.
Well, we're moving that way.
This is a more relevant
That's
question
the
than
whole
I thought.
point. That's the whole
All
point
right.
of the episode.
So,
He's not in a relationship yet.
do you
That's how you should always think.
ask a girl's father for permission to date her before you ask her?
In what
That's a hard one, huh?
Wait, in what context?
Like, would you do you? I don't even remember what I did. I think I told Holly first. I don't know.
I think it's okay because like there's godly kids that go to college and their parents aren't there
Right.
and they start dating. I think that's fine.
I think it's okay too.
Sooner rather than later. I think it's
Talk
more
to
important
them.
to get that parental accountability in sooner rather than later.
Yes.
Is it ideal? Some of the way my family was raised in like the ultra courtship model is like the girl shouldn't even know that you like her until you go talk to her dad, and then he kind of goes to her and goes, "Okay, so what do you think about Joe Schmo over there?" And she kind of goes, "He's all right. We're good friends." He's like, "So what if
Emphasis on friends.
what if he what if he wanted to come over for dinner on Thursday night?" And she goes, "That might be awkward." He goes, "Okay." Then he calls.
I might peek out my dinner at the table.
Then he calls Joe and says, "I don't think this is going to work."
Yeah.
And a good father is already talking with his daughter and kind of knows who she's aware of, who's on her radar in the first place. But yeah, that early, bringing that accountability in earlier rather than later is definitely better.
Okay, so I just had a spark go off in my mind from Proverbs 7 that
You've got too many
I
electrical
really want
fires,
to
man.
share. I know. Going crazy. But this is good advice for both young men and young women. So young men. So Proverbs 7, we all know, the code.
Yeah.
She's a P7. You know what that means, right?
Uh-uh.
You remember in Proverbs 7 the girl who
The adulteress down at the
Oh, okay.
The whore.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so like if there's a girl and she's you know what I'm saying, you call her a P7. So here's what it says about the young man who she victimizes. It says, "I perceived among the youths a young man lacking understanding." So the prerequisite for him to be taken is him lacking understanding. So as a young man, if you lack understanding, you are at risk of being eaten up by a P7.
Yes.
And as a godly woman, a young man can lack understanding and have very good direction in his life. But you need to see if he's lacking understanding. He might have great parents, be in a great church, be in a great community, but does he have understanding? Because if he doesn't, you run the risk of 10 years down the road, that lack of understanding leaves him vulnerable to the P7 who comes into your church 10 years later, and you have a mess in your hands. Mm-hmm. So young men need to have understanding, and young men need to pursue it, and young ladies need to look for it. But when it comes to the woman, it says she is loud and wayward. Her feet don't stay at home. She seizes them and kisses them. She says, "I had to offer sacrifices, and today I have paid my vows." So the funny thing is, she's claiming to be a Christian. She's like, I've offered my sacrifices. I went to the temple. I went to church. I've prayed. I've done all this stuff. So young men need to look out for a woman is a young woman who fakes being a Christian, who says
fake piety.
Yeah. Who says like, well, we're both Christians. Like, she's playing you.
And then when you ask, what's your favorite book of the Bible? And she says, Jesus.
Like, gosh.
I saw this cute cat meme that had a Bible verse on it once.
Yeah, so young men need to look out for the fake Christian woman who claims to have offered her sacrifices, and in the new covenant she'd be saying, "I just prayed," because in the new covenant, sacrifices of praise are the sacrifices that we offer. So she's going to be lifting her hands in worship. She's going to be praying. She's going to be
serving in the nursery. She's going to be volunteering at every church event. She's there.
She's there. She paid her vow. She offered her sacrifices, and then she comes to you at night and says, "So, hey, I'm a good Christian. What do you want to do about it?" Essentially.
Be careful. Make like Joseph and run.
There you go.
All right, David. We've been kicking it around here for about an hour.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts?
Sure. As a single guy, I'm speaking to the single people out there. You know, girls and guys alike, men and women that are single, just in this season of your life, just seek the Lord. It's the best thing you could do. He'll guide you. He'll give you wisdom. He'll impart these things in your life, and serving Him really is the best thing you could do. Like, as I guess a married guy, Jeremiah, when you're married, it's good. It's a good thing, and like you've found the person that you can serve the Lord with. But in your singleness, like, you don't have to worry about these things. Like, serve God, and He'll let you know. He'll let you know.
One of the phrases that my parents have used is that they'll say, "You run as fast as you can towards Christ, and if somebody keeps up, take notice."
Yes, I like that.
And I've always liked that picture of your goal is Christ, and if somebody comes along that has their goal is Christ just as much as you, pay attention.
Yes, and be friends first, because that makes everything so much easier. Mm-hmm. So much.
So you don't even know if you like her if you're not friends with her.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't know.
This has been Born to Reign. We welcomed in our friend and guests from the Kickin It Around podcast. Go check them out, because we're going to have another episode coming up from them with us. Mm-hmm. This is an epic crossover event.
Ruined their podcast.
Marvel has nothing on us. Star Wars has nothing on us. This is the crossover event of 2020. Go check out Kickin It Around podcast. You guys are on Instagram, right?
Yeah.
So check out their Instagram.
Facebook, Kickin It Around. You can also email us at kickinit2320@gmail.com.
2320.
Kickin It. Wait, what was it? Say it again.
Kickin it 2320
@gmail.com. And if any of you single ladies think that David's voice sounds particularly attractive, you could send an email to kickingitaround@2320@gmail.com.
There you have it. Thanks, guys. We'll catch you next time.